The thunder of hooves echoed through the canyon as Zarah Blackburn clutched the reins of her exhausted mare, the taste of dust and fear coating her tongue. 3 riders closed in behind her, their whoops and hollers carrying on the hot Arizona wind as she pushed her horse to its limit. A bullet whizzed past her ear, too close for comfort, and she knew her luck was running out. Somewhere between Tucson and her destination of Aspen Creek, she had stumbled into the territory of the most notorious gang in the territory, and now she was paying the price. Samuel Stone watched the scene unfold from the ridge above, his weathered face impassive beneath the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat. Once the most feared gunslinger west of the Mississippi, he'd been living in relative solitude for the past 2 years, avoiding the bounties on his head and the reputation that followed him like a curse. But watching the young woman fleeing for her life awakened something he thought long dead, a sense of responsibility. In one fluid motion, he mounted his stallion and descended the ridge at a dangerous angle. His hand instinctively found the Colt revolver at his hip, the weapon that had made him infamous throughout the territories. The outlaws, too focused on their prey, didn't notice him until it was too late. "That's far enough, boys," his voice carried across the canyon, deep and commanding, stopping the bandits in their tracks. The leader of the small gang turned, recognition dawning on his face. "Stone! Samuel Stone!" Fear replaced the malice in his eyes. "The lady's under my protection now," Samuel stated flatly, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. "Turn around and ride away, or I guarantee you won't live to regret it." The year was 1874, and in the untamed Arizona territory, a man's reputation could be as powerful as the gun he carried. The bandits exchanged glances, weighing their options. 3 against 1 were favorable odds, but not when that one was Samuel Stone, a man rumored to have killed 20 men in fair fights and another dozen in unfair ones. "This ain't over, Stone," the leader snarled, though he was already turning his horse. Samuel kept his weapon trained on them until they disappeared over the horizon. Only then did he approach the young woman, who had halted her exhausted mare and was watching him with a mixture of relief and wariness. "You're safe now, miss," he said, tipping his hat. "Samuel Stone at your service." Zarah brushed a strand of copper hair from her face, studying the man who had appeared like an avenging angel. His reputation preceded him wanted posters with his likeness decorated sheriff's offices across 3 states. Yet here he was, her unlikely savior. "Zarah Blackburn," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I owe you my life, Mr. Stone." Little did either of them know that this chance encounter would change both their destinies forever. "Your horse needs rest," Samuel observed, noting the mare's heaving flanks. "My cabin's not far. You'll be safe there until you can continue your journey." Zarah hesitated, weighing her options. Accepting the hospitality of a notorious gunslinger wasn't what her father had in mind when he sent her west to live with her aunt in Aspen Creek. But with night falling and bandits possibly regrouping, she had little choice. "I accept your offer, Mr. Stone, and I'm grateful for it." Samuel led her through a winding canyon path that would have been impossible to find without intimate knowledge of the terrain. His cabin sat nestled against a rock face, partially hidden by juniper trees, a perfect hideout for a man with enemies. The interior was surprisingly tidy, if sparse. A small wood stove, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed in the corner, and shelves lined with books that seemed out of place in an outlaw's hideaway. "You can take the bed," Samuel said, already busying himself with starting a fire in the stove. "I'll sleep by the door." "You're very kind for—" Zarah caught herself. "For an outlaw," he finished her thought, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Not all stories told about me are true, Miss Blackburn, though enough are that I don't blame your caution." As Samuel prepared a simple meal of beans and jerky, Zarah found herself studying him. He moved with an economy of motion that spoke of constant vigilance. His face was handsome in a rugged way, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble and deep-set eyes that missed nothing. A scar ran along his left cheekbone, telling of past violence. "What brings you to these parts, if you don't mind my asking?" Samuel questioned as they ate. "Not many young ladies travel alone through bandit country." Zarah set down her tin cup. "My father died 3 months ago. Consumption. With him gone and the drought ruining our farm in Kansas, there was nothing left for me there. My Aunt Martha lives in Aspen Creek. She's offered me a home and work in her millinery shop." Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "Aspen Creek's about 2 days' ride from here, longer with your mare in this condition. It's a decent town. Sheriff Daniels keeps good order there. You sound familiar with it." A shadow crossed his face. "I know most towns in the territory, which ones to avoid and which might shoot a man like me on sight." "Is that why you live out here alone? Because of who you are?" Samuel's laugh held no humor. "Because of who people think I am, Miss Blackburn. There's a difference." The night deepened around them, and Zarah found herself sharing more of her story, her childhood on the Kansas prairie, her mother's death when she was 12, the years helping her father work their struggling farm. Samuel listened more than he spoke, but occasionally offered glimpses into his own past. Growing up in Texas, working cattle drives as a young man, the first time he'd been forced to draw his gun in self-defense. "One killing leads to a reputation," he explained, stoking the fire. "A reputation leads to challenges. Each time I defended myself, the stories grew wilder. Now I'm wanted for murders I never committed, alongside the ones I did." "Which were justified?" Zarah asked boldly. His eyes met hers. "Every man I've killed was trying to kill me first. That's all the justification I've needed. But the law doesn't always see those distinctions." When Zarah finally retired to the narrow bed, sleep eluded her. The events of the day played in her mind: the terror of the chase, the timely arrival of her rescuer, and the strange comfort she felt in the company of a man whose name was whispered in fear across the frontier. Morning came with the scent of coffee and the sound of activity outside. Zarah emerged from the cabin to find Samuel tending to her mare, his gentleness with the animal at odds with his fearsome reputation. "She'll be fit to travel tomorrow," he said without looking up. "I've repacked your saddlebags with some provisions." "You're very thorough, Mr. Stone." "Samuel," he corrected. "And thoroughness keeps a man alive in these parts." Zarah spent the day resting and observing her host. He maintained a constant awareness of their surroundings, checking the horizon periodically, his hand never far from his weapon. Yet in the quiet moments she caught him with a book in hand. Thoreau's Walden, his expression softened in contemplation. "You surprise me," she admitted as they shared lunch under the shade of a juniper tree. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect? Someone crueler, less educated?" "Not someone who reads philosophy and treats a stranger with kindness." Samuel's smile was brief but genuine. "The world's full of surprises, Miss Blackburn." "Zarah," she insisted. "If I'm to call you Samuel, you must use my given name." That evening, as they sat before the fire, Samuel revealed more of himself than he had to anyone in years. He spoke of the fateful day 5 years prior, when a wealthy rancher's son had challenged him to a duel in a saloon in Dodge City. The young man had been drunk, belligerent, convinced of his own invincibility. Samuel had tried to walk away. "I didn't draw until he fired," Samuel explained, his voice hollow with the memory. "Hit me here." He touched his side. "I returned fire on instinct." He died instantly. His father put $1,000 bounty on my head the next day, claimed I murdered his boy in cold blood. That was the beginning of the end of any normal life for me." Zarah listened, her heart aching for the man before her, a man forced into a life of isolation by circumstance and the ruthless frontier justice that offered no redemption. "There must be a way to clear your name," she suggested. Samuel shook his head. "Some stains don't wash out, Zarah. I've made peace with that." But the look in his eyes told her he'd made no such peace. The following morning dawned clear and cool. Samuel saddled Zarah's mare and his own stallion, checking the cinches with practiced hands. "You're coming with me?" Zarah asked, surprised. "To the outskirts of Aspen Creek," he confirmed. "Those bandits might still be looking for you. I'll see you safely to town." The journey took them through stunning landscapes, red rock canyons giving way to pine forests as they gained elevation. Samuel rode slightly ahead, vigilant for any sign of danger, occasionally pointing out landmarks or sharing knowledge of the land's history. "The Apache considered these mountains sacred," he explained as they passed a dramatic rock formation. "They believed the spirits of their ancestors dwelled here." "You speak as if you respect their beliefs," Zarah observed. "I spent a winter with the Kairikahua after I was wounded in a skirmish. Their medicine man saved my life. I learned their language, their ways. They have wisdom our kind too often ignores." Zarah found herself increasingly drawn to this complex man, a gunslinger with a philosopher's mind, a fugitive with a strong moral code. His contradictions fascinated her, and she caught herself watching the way the sunlight played across his features, the confident set of his shoulders as he rode. As evening approached, they made camp in a protected hollow. Samuel built a small fire, careful to keep it from being visible from a distance. They shared a meal of jerky and hardtack, supplemented with wild berries Samuel had gathered along the trail. "We should reach Aspen Creek by midday tomorrow," he said, studying the stars appearing overhead. "Your aunt will be relieved to see you." "Yes," Zarah agreed, though she felt an unexpected reluctance at the thought of their journey ending. "Samuel, I've been thinking about what you told me about the bounty on your head." He tensed visibly. "What about it?" "The rancher's son who challenged you, what was his name?" "Nathaniel Hargrove, son of Victor Hargrove, one of the wealthiest cattle barons in Kansas." Zarah's eyes widened. "I know of the Hargroves. My father sold hay to their ranch before the drought. They have a reputation for ruthlessness, but also for influence. If there were witnesses to what truly happened—" "There were," Samuel confirmed. "A saloon full of them, but Hargrove's money bought their silence or confused their memories. The few who might have spoken truthfully were drifters, long gone by the time any inquiry was made." "There must be someone," Zarah insisted. "Someone who saw and would testify to the truth." Samuel's expression softened at her determination. "Why does it matter so much to you?" "Because justice matters," she replied simply. "And because you saved my life. I'd like to repay that debt if I can." He reached across the small space between them, his calloused fingers briefly touching her hand. "You owe me nothing, Zarah. Your safe passage to your aunt is payment enough." The contact was brief but electric, sending a current through Zarah that both startled and exhilarated her. She saw in Samuel's eyes that he had felt it too, this unexpected connection between them. But he withdrew his hand and turned away, as if reminding himself of the gulf that separated them, he an outlaw, she a respectable young woman with prospects for a normal life. The night passed in relative silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Zarah lay awake long after Samuel had taken first watch, staring at the stars and wondering at the strange turn her life had taken. Just days ago, She had been mourning her father and resigned to a quiet existence in Aspen Creek. Now she found herself captivated by a man whose very name inspired fear throughout the territories. Morning came with a change in the air, both the weather and the mood between them. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon as they broke camp, and Samuel's vigilance intensified. "We need to move quickly," he urged. "That storm's building fast, and we're still 4 hours from town." They rode at a brisk pace, the wind picking up around them, carrying the scent of rain. Zarah's mare, though rested, struggled to maintain the pace Samuel set. 2 hours into their ride, with the storm almost upon them, disaster struck. A rattlesnake, disturbed by their approach, spooked Zarah's horse. The mare reared violently, throwing Zarah to the ground before bolting into the underbrush. Zarah landed hard, the impact forcing the air from her lungs. Samuel was at her side in an instant, dismounting before his horse had fully stopped. "Are you hurt?" His hands moved gently over her arms, checking for injuries, his face tight with concern. Zarah winced as she tried to sit up. "My ankle, I think it's sprained." The first fat drops of rain began to fall as Samuel confirmed her assessment. The ankle was swelling rapidly but wasn't broken. He looked to where her horse had disappeared, then at the darkening sky. "We need shelter," he decided, helping her to her feet. "There's an old line shack about a mile from here. Can you ride with me?" Before she could answer, he'd lifted her onto his stallion and mounted behind her, one arm securely around her waist. The closeness was both necessary and intoxicating, his chest solid against her back, his breath warm near her ear. The rain became a deluge as they rode, soaking them to the skin despite Samuel's oilskin coat, which he had wrapped around Zarah. By the time they reached the line shack, a crude but solid structure used by cowboys during cattle drives, they were both shivering. The interior was dusty but dry, with a small fireplace, a rickety table, and a single narrow cot. Samuel helped Zarah to the cot before quickly gathering the meager firewood stacked by the hearth. "Your clothes are soaked through," he observed as the fire began to catch. "You'll catch your death if you don't get warm and dry." He turned his back, offering privacy. "I'll see to the horse while you change into something dry from your saddlebags." When he returned, Zarah had changed into her only spare dress and had spread her wet clothes near the fire. Samuel's own clothes clung to him, emphasizing the lean strength of his frame. "Your turn," she said, averting her eyes. "I'll look away." Samuel hesitated, then nodded, retrieving a worn but clean shirt and trousers from his saddlebags. Zarah kept her back turned, acutely aware of the sounds of wet fabric being removed, of movement behind her. "Decent now," he announced after a moment. When she turned, she found him hanging his wet clothes beside hers, the fire casting a golden glow across his features. He'd removed his gun belt but kept it within reach, ever vigilant, even here. The storm intensified outside, rain hammering on the roof and wind howling through the cracks in the walls. Samuel busied himself preparing a meager meal from their provisions, while Zarah tried to ignore the throbbing in her ankle and the strange intimacy of their situation. "Storm's not letting up," Samuel observed as they ate. "We're likely here for the night." Zarah nodded, trying to mask her nervousness. "My aunt will be worried. I was expected yesterday." "Aspen Creek's folks know these mountains. They'll understand a delay due to weather." He examined her ankle, which he had wrapped with a strip of cloth. "How does it feel?" "Better," she lied, not wanting to add to his concerns. Samuel saw through her brave front. "You're a poor liar, Zarah Blackburn." His tone was gentle, almost affectionate. "It needs cold to reduce the swelling." He went to the door, returning with a handful of wet cloths he'd held in the rain. Kneeling before her, he carefully applied the cold compress to her ankle. His touch was surprisingly tender for hands that had dealt death. "Thank you," she murmured, "for everything. You've gone far beyond what any stranger might do." Samuel looked up, meeting her gaze. "I stopped seeing you as a stranger after our first conversation." The admission hung in the air between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Zarah found herself reaching out, her fingers lightly touching the scar on his cheekbone. "How did you get this?" she asked softly. "Bar fight in Tombstone 3 years back. Man came at me with a broken bottle." His voice had roughened. "Zarah, you shouldn't what? Show concern for a man who's shown me nothing but kindness and protection." "I'm not the kind of man a woman like you should concern herself with," he said firmly, though he hadn't moved away from her touch. "I have no future to offer anyone, only a past that follows me like a shadow." Zarah's hand dropped to her side. "I'm not asking for a future, Samuel. I'm simply acknowledging the present, that in this moment I'm grateful to be here with you, rather than at the mercy of those bandits or this storm." The tension between them eased somewhat, replaced by a comfortable silence as the evening wore on. They shared stories to pass the time, Zarah speaking of her dreams to someday open a school, Samuel recounting adventures from his cattle-driving days. The howling of the wind outside only emphasized the coziness of their shelter, creating an intimacy that seemed to exist outside of normal time. As night deepened and the fire burned low, the practical matter of sleeping arrangements presented itself. "Take the cot," Samuel insisted. "I'll make do on the floor." "You'll do no such thing," Zarah countered. "Your back will punish you for it, and who knows what creatures might visit in the night. The cot is small but adequate for two if we're considerate." Samuel's expression was unreadable in the dim firelight. "That wouldn't be proper. Propriety seems a distant concern when weighed against pragmatism, don't you think? Besides," she added with a small smile, "I trust you, Samuel Stone." Those simple words seemed to affect him deeply. He stared at her for a long moment before nodding. "Back to back, then. And I'll keep my gun close, just in case those bandits decided to brave the storm." The arrangement was awkward at first, both of them rigid, careful not to touch. But as the night wore on and the temperature dropped, they instinctively moved closer for warmth. Zarah found herself acutely aware of Samuel's breathing, the solid presence of him beside her. Despite the impropriety of their situation, she felt safer than she had since her father's death. She woke sometime in the night to find that they had shifted in their sleep. Samuel's arm was around her waist, her back pressed against his chest, their bodies fitting together as if designed for each other. His breathing was deep, and even the first time she'd seen him truly relaxed, Zarah knew she should move away, maintain the boundaries propriety demanded. Instead, she found herself nestling closer, taking comfort in his warmth and strength. Tomorrow would bring complications and separation. Tonight, in this moment, she allowed herself this small solace. Morning arrived with clearing skies and birdsong. Zarah opened her eyes to find Samuel already up, rebuilding the fire and preparing coffee. He moved with his usual quiet efficiency, but there was a new tension in his shoulders. "Sleep well?" he asked without looking at her. "Better than I expected," she answered truthfully. "How's the weather?" "Cleared up. We should be able to reach Aspen Creek by noon if your ankle can bear the journey." His tone was carefully neutral, as if establishing distance between them. Zarah swung her legs over the edge of the cot, testing her ankle. The swelling had subsided considerably, though it still ached when she put weight on it. "I'll manage," she assured him. "Samuel, about last night, nothing to discuss," he cut her off, finally turning to face her. "We did what was necessary for comfort and warmth, nothing more." His dismissal stung more than Zarah wanted to admit. "Of course," she agreed, keeping her voice even. "Practical considerations only." They prepared for departure in relative silence, the easy camaraderie of previous days replaced by an awkward formality. Samuel helped Zarah onto his horse, then mounted behind her, maintaining as much distance as the saddle allowed. The morning was crisp and clear after the storm, the landscape washed clean, wildflowers nodding in the gentle breeze. Under different circumstances, Zarah would have found it beautiful. Now, she could only focus on the growing sense of loss as they drew closer to Aspen Creek and the inevitable parting that awaited them. They crested a hill around midday, and Aspen Creek came into view in the valley below a bustling frontier town with a main street lined with businesses, a church spire rising above the buildings, and scattered houses spreading outward. Smoke curled from chimneys, and even from this distance they could see the activity of daily life. Samuel reined in his horse, staying atop the ridge. "This is where I leave you," he said, his voice gruff. "It's not safe for me to ride into town." Zarah turned in the saddle to face him. "You can't just leave. My ankle is much improved," he finished for her. "And your mare likely found her way to town already. Someone will help you the rest of the way." "Will I see you again?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Samuel's expression softened momentarily. "Better for you if you don't, Zarah. You have a chance at a good life here. Don't complicate it by association with a man like me." "A man like you saved my life," she reminded him. "A man like you showed me kindness and protection when I needed it most. Those aren't complications, they're virtues." He shook his head, though his eyes betrayed a yearning that matched her own. "The world doesn't see it that way. A woman seen with Samuel Stone becomes a target or an outcast. I won't do that to you." Before she could argue further, the sound of approaching riders reached them. Samuel tensed, his hand moving to his gun. "Get down," he ordered, helping her slide from the saddle. "Stay hidden in those trees." 4 riders appeared on the road below, heading in their direction. As they drew closer, Zarah could make out the glint of a star on one man's chest, the sheriff. "They're looking for me," she realized. "My aunt must have reported me missing." Samuel's expression was grim. "All the more reason for me to disappear. Sheriff Daniels knows my face." Zarah grabbed his arm as he prepared to mount. "Wait, this could be an opportunity." "Sheriff Daniels is known as a fair man. If I explain what happened, how you saved me—" "No," Samuel cut her off. "I won't risk it, and you shouldn't risk your reputation by defending me." "My reputation?" Zarah's temper flared. "A man's life is at stake, your life, and you're worried about gossip." The riders were drawing closer, now clearly visible on the ridge road. It would be moments before they spotted them. "Go," Samuel urged, practically lifting her onto his horse. "Ride down to meet them. Tell them whatever story you want about your delay, but leave me out of it. Please, Zarah." She looked into his eyes, seeing the genuine concern there, not for himself, but for her. With sudden clarity, she understood that this was a man who had accepted his fate, who expected nothing but continued persecution and loneliness. A man who, despite that, still cared enough to protect others from sharing his burden. "I can't just forget you," she whispered. "You must." He stepped back, his hand lingering on hers for just a moment. "Go now before they see me." With a heavy heart, Zarah turned the horse and rode down the slope toward the approaching search party. She heard Samuel retreating into the trees behind her, disappearing as completely as he had appeared in her life. Sheriff Daniels spotted her first, raising his hand to halt his companions. "Miss Blackburn," he called as she approached. "Martha's been worried sick about you." Zarah composed herself, pushing down the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "I'm afraid my journey was more eventful than anticipated, Sheriff." Bandits chased me off the main road, my horse was spooked by a snake, and the storm forced me to take shelter." The sheriff looked her over with concern. "You're injured." "A sprained ankle, nothing serious." She glanced behind her, but there was no sign of Samuel. "I'm just grateful to have made it safely." "As are we all," the sheriff agreed, signaling one of his deputies to offer his horse. "Let's get you to your aunt. She's been beside herself with worry." As they rode into Aspen Creek, Zarah found herself studying the town with new eyes, seeing it as Samuel might. Noting the wanted posters on the sheriff's office wall, the places a man might hide or escape if needed. She answered the sheriff's questions mechanically, providing a sanitized version of her ordeal that omitted any mention of her rescuer. Aunt Martha's millinery shop sat on a corner of Main Street, with living quarters above. The older woman rushed out at their approach, her face lighting with relief. "Zarah, thank God you're safe." Martha embraced her as the deputy helped her down from the horse. "When your mare arrived riderless yesterday, I feared the worst." "I'm fine, Aunt Martha," Zarah assured her, leaning on the older woman's arm as they entered the shop. "Just tired and a bit bruised." The next few days passed in a blur of introductions and settling in. Aspen Creek proved to be exactly the type of friendly frontier community Zarah's father had described, a place where neighbors helped one another, and newcomers were welcomed with casseroles and invitations to social gatherings. Under other circumstances, Zarah would have been grateful for the warm reception. Instead, she found herself distracted, her thoughts constantly returning to Samuel. She wondered where he was, if he was safe, if he thought of her as often as she thought of him. At night, she dreamed of their brief time together, the conversations by firelight, the feeling of security in his presence, the undeniable connection that had grown between them. A week after her arrival, while arranging hats in her aunt's shop, Zarah overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. "Heard they spotted Stone up in the high country," a man was saying to the barber next door. "Militia's forming to go after him. Hargrove's bounty is up to 2,000 now." "Shame," the barber replied. "Always thought that Hargrove business sounded fishy. Young Nathaniel was known to draw on men when he was in his cups." "Maybe so, but 2,000's a lot of money. Men will be coming from all over to try their luck." Zarah's hands trembled as she placed a bonnet on its stand. Samuel was in danger, and partly because of her, the search party that had come for her might have spotted him, or perhaps someone in town had seen them together on the ridge. That evening, after her aunt had retired, Zarah made her decision. She couldn't stand by while Samuel faced an army of bounty hunters alone. At the very least, she could warn him. At most, she pushed away the thought of what else she might hope for. Using the skills honed during years of managing her father's farm accounts, she wrote a letter to Victor Hargrove. In it, she claimed to have information about his son's death from a reliable eyewitness herself. She had been traveling through Dodge City, she wrote, and had seen the entire incident. Young Nathaniel had indeed drawn first, firing at Samuel Stone while the latter was attempting to leave the saloon peacefully. She described details of the saloon that she had gleaned from Samuel's account, adding enough specifics to make her story credible. She signed it with her real name and address, knowing the risk she was taking. If Hargrove chose to pursue the matter, she would be called upon to justify her claims, perhaps even in court. But if it created enough doubt to reduce the bounty or call off the hunt, it would be worth it. The next morning, Zarah made her excuses to her aunt and visited the general store, where she purchased supplies she might need for a journey: jerky, hardtack, matches, a small medical kit. She had no intention of returning to the line shack. Samuel would be far from there by now, but she recalled him mentioning a cave system in the eastern foothills, where he sometimes sheltered during bad weather. It was her best chance of finding him. As she was leaving the store, Sheriff Daniels approached her, his expression serious. "Miss Blackburn, might I have a word?" Zarah's heart raced, but she kept her composure. "Of course, Sheriff. Is something wrong?" He guided her to a quiet spot near the livery stable. "I've been thinking about your story about the bandits and the storm. It's a miracle you survived such an ordeal alone." "I was fortunate," she said carefully. "Indeed. Especially considering the condition of your mare when she arrived. Well-fed, curry-combed, properly cared for." His gaze was shrewd, almost as if someone had been looking after her. "And you?" Zarah maintained eye contact, unwilling to lie directly but equally unwilling to endanger Samuel. "Are you suggesting I wasn't alone, Sheriff?" "I'm suggesting that the truth might be more complicated than you've let on." He lowered his voice. "There's talk of Stone being in these parts. Some are saying a woman matching your description was seen with him." "Rumors spread quickly in small towns," Zarah observed. "That they do." The sheriff studied her for a long moment. "Miss Blackburn, I've been lawman in these parts for 15 years. I've learned to trust my instincts about people. Whatever happened on your journey, I believe you're a decent woman. But associating with certain individuals can lead to trouble, even for the innocent. I appreciate your concern, Sheriff, but I assure you I can manage my own affairs." He nodded slowly. "Just be careful. Not all situations are as they first appear. That applies to people too, even those with fearsome reputations." As he walked away, Zarah pondered his cryptic warning. Had he been threatening her or offering a veiled form of support? There was no time to decipher his meaning. She needed to find Samuel before the bounty hunters did. That afternoon, she borrowed a horse from her aunt's neighbor, claiming she wanted to familiarize herself with the area. Following Samuel's descriptions and her own memories of the landscape, she headed toward the eastern foothills. The journey was more difficult than she had anticipated. The terrain grew increasingly rugged, and several times she feared she had lost her way. As the sun began to set, anxiety gnawed at her. She had been foolish to come alone without a clear plan or even certainty that Samuel would be where she hoped. Just as she was considering turning back, she spotted a thin wisp of smoke rising from between two rock formations. It was so faint that anyone not specifically looking would have missed it, but to Zarah, it was like a beacon. She approached cautiously, remembering Samuel's lessons about moving quietly. Tethering her horse to a stunted pine, she continued on foot, wincing occasionally as her still tender ankle protested. The cave entrance was well hidden behind a stand of juniper. Zarah hesitated at the threshold, suddenly uncertain. What if it wasn't Samuel? What if she was interrupting some other fugitive or hunter? "You can come in, Zarah. I've been expecting you." Samuel's voice from within the cave sent a flood of relief through her. She ducked under the low entrance to find him sitting beside a small, carefully contained fire, his gun resting across his knees. "How did you know it was me?" she asked, moving closer to the warmth. "Been watching you pick your way up the hillside for the past hour." A hint of amusement touched his lips. "You make enough noise to wake the dead." Despite his light tone, Zarah could see the wariness in his posture, the circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. "You knew I would come." "Hoped you wouldn't," he corrected. "But suspected you might when I heard about the militia forming in town. Figured you'd try something noble and dangerous." "They're hunting you because of me," she said, kneeling beside him. "Someone must have seen us together." Samuel shook his head. "They're hunting me because there's money to be made, same as always." He studied her face, his expression softening. "Why did you come, Zarah? You're risking everything, your reputation, your aunt's standing in the community, maybe even your safety." "I came to warn you, and—" She faltered, then gathered her courage. And because I couldn't bear the thought of never seeing you again. The confession hung in the air between them. Samuel's expression was a complex mixture of tenderness, regret, and something deeper that made Zarah's heart race. "You shouldn't feel that way," he said at last, though he made no move to increase the distance between them. "I'm not worth the risk you're taking." "That's for me to decide," Zarah countered. "I've written to Victor Hargrove." Samuel stiffened. "You did what?" "I told him I witnessed his son's death, that it was self-defense. I described the saloon, the circumstances, everything you told me." "Zarah, do you have any idea how dangerous that was?" Anger and concern battled in his voice. "Hargrove isn't the kind of man who accepts being wrong." "He could come after you. Let him," she said with more confidence than she felt. "I'm not afraid to stand by the truth, and neither should you be. Samuel, you can't live like this forever, always running, always alone. There must be a way to clear your name." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "Even if Hargrove believed you, which he won't, there are other bounties, other men who want me dead for reasons that have nothing to do with the truth." "Then we'll address them one by one," Zarah insisted. "Samuel, I've spent my life following the safe path, doing what was expected. My father's death showed me how fleeting life can be. I don't want safety anymore if it means denying what I feel." "And what do you feel?" His voice had dropped to a near whisper. Zarah moved closer until she could feel the warmth of his breath on her face. "I feel that meeting you was the best thing that's ever happened to me. I feel that there's more goodness in you than in most men who have never held a gun. I feel that if I walk away from this from you, I'll regret it for the rest of my days." For a moment, Samuel remained perfectly still. Then, with a gentleness that belied his strength, he cupped her face in his hands. "Zarah Blackburn, you are the most stubborn, reckless, beautiful woman I've ever known." His lips found hers in a kiss that started tentatively but quickly deepened. Years of loneliness and weeks of growing attraction culminating in this moment of connection. Zarah's arms wound around his neck, drawing him closer, her body molding against his as if they were two parts of a whole finally reunited. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "This changes nothing," he murmured. "I'm still a wanted man." "You still deserve better." "It changes everything," Zarah corrected him, "because now you're not facing it alone." She stayed with him that night, sharing the meager dinner of jerky and beans she had brought, talking long into the darkness about possibilities. Samuel was resistant at first, convinced that his past was inescapable. But as the night wore on, Zarah saw a spark of hope kindling in his eyes, a dangerous, fragile thing, but present nonetheless. They spoke of practical matters. The possibility of Samuel surrendering to Sheriff Daniels under Zarah's guarantee of his character. The potential for a fair trial if witnesses could be found. Even the radical option of starting fresh in a new territory where his reputation hadn't preceded him. California, perhaps, Samuel mused as they lay side by side, watching the fire's dying embers. Or up to Montana territory, somewhere I could build something, become someone new. "We could build something," Zarah corrected, her head resting on his chest. "Together." The word hung between them, full of promise and risk. Samuel's arm tightened around her. "Together," he repeated, as if testing how it felt on his tongue. "I've been alone so long, I'm not sure I remember how to be otherwise." "You'll learn," she assured him. "We both will." Morning came too soon, bringing with it the harsh light of reality. Zarah knew she had to return to town before her absence caused alarm, yet leaving Samuel felt like tearing away a part of herself. "I'll come back tomorrow," she promised as he walked her to where her horse was tethered. "With news from town and more supplies." Samuel nodded, though his expression had reverted to its familiar guardedness. Be careful. Don't do anything that might connect you to me. The less people suspect, the safer you'll be. I'm not ashamed of helping you, Zarah insisted. It's not about shame. He caught her hand, his grip firm. It's about keeping you safe until we figure this out. Promise me you'll be discreet. I promise, she agreed reluctantly. Their parting kiss was brief but intense, laden with things still unsaid. As Zarah rode back toward Aspen Creek, she felt as though she were living in two worlds simultaneously, the respectable one of her aunt's millinery shop and proper society, and the dangerous, exhilarating one that existed wherever Samuel was. The town was unusually busy when she returned. Clusters of men gathered outside the saloon and sheriff's office. Zarah kept her head down, hurrying to return the borrowed horse and make her way to her aunt's shop without drawing attention. Martha looked up from her work as Zarah entered, her expression a mixture of relief and exasperation. "There you are. I was beginning to worry. Did you enjoy your ride?" "Very much," Zarah replied, removing her bonnet. "The landscapes here are breathtaking." "Well, while you were admiring the scenery, quite the commotion started in town." Martha's eyes gleamed with the excitement of fresh gossip. A telegram came for Sheriff Daniels. Apparently, Victor Hargrove himself is coming to Aspen Creek. Zarah nearly dropped the teacup she was lifting. "Hargrove? Here? Why?" "Something about new evidence regarding that gunslinger Stone. You know, the one who killed his son." Martha leaned closer, lowering her voice. "They say Hargrove received a letter from someone in town claiming to have witnessed the whole thing. Can you imagine?" Zarah's mouth went dry. When is he expected to arrive?" "Day after tomorrow, on the afternoon stage. The whole town's talking about it. Sheriff's organizing a special reception committee." Martha studied her niece's pale face. "Zarah, are you feeling well? You look positively ill." "Just tired from the ride," Zarah managed, her mind racing. "I think I'll lie down for a bit." In the privacy of her room, Zarah paced, torn between panic and determination. Her letter had worked perhaps too well. Hargrove was coming to Aspen Creek, likely to confront her about her claims. This could be the opportunity to clear Samuel's name. Or it could be a trap. She needed to warn Samuel, but returning to the cave so soon would raise suspicions. She would have to wait until morning, using the intervening time to gather as much information as possible about Hargrove's intentions. That evening, Zarah joined her aunt for dinner at the home of Martha's friend, Mrs. Peterson, whose husband served as the town's banker. The conversation inevitably turned to the impending arrival of the cattle baron. "I hear he's bringing quite an entourage," Mr. Peterson remarked, carving the roast. "Private security, his lawyer, even a judge from the territorial court." "A judge?" Zarah couldn't hide her surprise. "Why would he need a judge?" "To expedite matters if Stone is captured, I imagine," Peterson replied. "Hargrove's not a man who likes to wait for justice, or what he perceives as justice at any rate." Mrs. Peterson nodded sagely. "They say he's never been the same since his son's death, obsessed with revenge." "But if there's new evidence suggesting it wasn't murder?" Zarah began carefully. Peterson scoffed. "Evidence can be interpreted many ways, Miss Blackburn, and when a man as wealthy as Victor Hargrove is doing the interpreting, it tends to favor his perspective." The conversation left Zarah more anxious than ever. If Hargrove was bringing a judge under his influence, any trial would be a mere formality, a way to give legal sanction to what amounted to a lynching. She barely slept that night, her mind racing with possible courses of action. By dawn, she had made her decision. She would need to convince Samuel to leave the area immediately before Hargrove arrived. They could head north toward Montana as they had discussed. or west toward the untamed territories, where they might lose themselves among the waves of settlers seeking new beginnings. As soon as it was reasonable to do so, Zarah borrowed her aunt's mare, claiming she wanted to visit the small lake she had discovered on her previous ride. Martha, busy with preparations for a hat to present to Mrs. Hargrove, barely acknowledged her departure. Zarah rode directly to the cave, taking care to ensure she wasn't followed. To her dismay, she found it empty, the fire cold, Samuel's few possessions gone. For a moment, panic seized her. Had he abandoned her? Had he been captured? A soft whistle from above drew her attention. Samuel was perched on a rock outcropping higher up the hillside, his rifle across his knees. He descended with the easy grace of a mountain cat, his expression grave. "You shouldn't have come," he said without preamble. "I saw riders checking the foothills at dawn." "Hargrove is coming," Zarah blurted. "He received my letter and he's bringing a judge. Security, it's to be a show trial, Samuel. We have to leave today. Head north while we still can." Samuel's face hardened. "We? There is no we in this situation, Zarah. I'm not dragging you into life as a fugitive. I'm already involved." She grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. "Don't you understand? Hargrove knows someone in Aspen Creek wrote to him. How long before he figures out it was me? I'm compromised whether I stay or go." A muscle worked in Samuel's jaw as he absorbed her words. "All the more reason for you to create distance between us. Deny writing the letter, say it must have been someone else. And let you face this alone. Never." Zarah's grip on his arm tightened. "I love you, Samuel Stone. I won't lose you just when I've found you." The declaration hung in the air between them. Samuel's expression shifted, the hardness giving way to a vulnerability that few had ever witnessed. "Zarah," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "Don't tell me it's too soon," she interrupted. "Don't tell me I don't know what I'm feeling. I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Samuel drew her into his arms, his embrace fierce and protective. "I love you too," he admitted against her hair. "God help me. I've loved you since that first night by the fire when you looked at me and saw a man, not a monster." For a precious moment, they held each other, the world and its dangers temporarily at bay. Then Samuel pulled back, his expression resolute. "Which is why I can't let you throw away your life for me. You deserve better than constantly looking over your shoulder, never putting down roots." "What I deserve is to choose my own path," Zarah countered. "And I choose you." Before Samuel could argue further, the sound of approaching horses echoed through the canyon. They froze, exchanging alarmed glances. "The cave," Samuel whispered, already pulling her toward the entrance. "Quick!" They barely made it inside before 6 riders appeared in the clearing below. From their vantage point in the shadow of the cave mouth, they could see Sheriff Daniels among them. Along with several men Zarah didn't recognize, bounty hunters, most likely, hired by Hargrove to supplement the local law. "Spread out," Daniels ordered. "Check every cave and crevice. Stone's up here somewhere, tracks don't lie." Samuel pulled Zarah deeper into the cave, where a narrow fissure led to a secondary chamber. "There's another way out," he murmured. "A tight squeeze, but it comes out higher up the ridge. If we're quiet, we might make it." Zarah nodded, her heart pounding so loudly she feared it might give them away. They moved carefully through the darkness, Samuel leading the way with the confidence of someone who had mapped every escape route. The secondary exit was as narrow as Samuel had warned, barely wide enough for them to shimmy through on their stomachs. Zarah's dress caught on the rough stone, and she had to bite her lip to keep from crying out as the fabric tore and scraped her skin. They emerged onto a narrow ledge overlooking a steep drop. From this height, they could see the search party spreading out below, methodically checking every possible hiding place. "My horse," Zarah whispered. "I left it tethered by the main cave entrance." Samuel grimaced. We'll have to leave it. There's a game trail that follows this ridge. If we can reach the north slope, we might be able to circle back to my camp. I have supplies cached there, enough to get us to the border. Moving as silently as possible, they made their way along the treacherous path, clinging to rock faces and helping each other over difficult sections. Zarah's ankle, still not fully healed, throbbed with every step, but she bit back any complaint. Freedom, their future depended on this escape. They had nearly reached the northern slope when disaster struck. A loose rock gave way under Zarah's foot, sending a cascade of smaller stones tumbling down the hillside. The noise, magnified by the canyon's acoustics, was impossible to miss. There, one of the bounty hunters shouted, pointing up to their position. On the ridge, run, Samuel urged, pulling Zarah along the path. Don't look back. They fled along the ridgeline, abandoning stealth for speed. Behind them, they could hear the hunters scrambling to follow, calls for surrender echoing off the canyon walls. A shot rang out, the bullet splintering rock near Zarah's head. Samuel pushed her ahead of him, placing his body between her and their pursuers. Keep going, he ordered. Don't stop for anything. The path widened as they reached the northern face of the hill, offering better footing but also making them more visible targets. Another shot whistled past, closer this time. Samuel, they're gaining on us, Zarah gasped, her lungs burning from the exertion. He glanced back, his expression grim. There's a stand of trees ahead. If we can reach it, the rest of his sentence was lost as a bullet found its mark, striking Samuel in the shoulder. He stumbled, nearly falling over the edge of the path. Zarah cried out, grabbing his good arm to steady him. Go, he grunted through gritted teeth. Leave me, Zarah, save yourself. Not without you, she insisted, supporting his weight as they continued forward. Together, remember, we promised. Blood soaked his shirt, but Samuel kept moving, his jaw set against the pain. They reached the tree line just as another volley of shots rang out, bullets embedding themselves in the trunks around them. The dense forest offered better cover, allowing them to temporarily lose their pursuers. Samuel leaned heavily against a pine, his breathing labored. Let me see, Zarah demanded, carefully pulling aside his bloodied shirt. The wound was a clean through and through, missing any vital organs but bleeding profusely. Using strips torn from her petticoat, she fashioned a crude bandage, working quickly despite her trembling hands. We need to keep moving, Samuel insisted, though his face had gone alarmingly pale. They'll bring in tracking dogs soon. You're in no condition to travel, Zarah argued, tying off the bandage. We need to find shelter, somewhere I can treat this properly. Samuel's eyes focused on something over her shoulder. Zarah, he said quietly, don't turn around. Walk slowly toward me. The hairs on the back of her neck rose as she realized they weren't alone. Moving with deliberate calm, she stepped closer to Samuel, whose good hand had drifted to his holster. That won't be necessary, Stone, came a familiar voice. Sheriff Daniels stepped from behind a massive pine, his revolver drawn but pointed at the ground. I'm not here to shoot you. Either of you. Zarah whirled to face him, instinctively placing herself between the lawman and Samuel. Sheriff, please. He's injured. This is all a misunderstanding. Save it, Miss Blackburn. Daniels cut her off, though not unkindly. I suspected you weren't telling the whole truth about your journey. Now I know why. His gaze shifted to Samuel. You look like hell, Stone. That needs proper tending. Why are you alone? Samuel asked suspiciously. Where are the others? Checking the eastern slope. I had a hunch you'd head north. Daniels holstered his weapon. Figured I should find you before they did. Zarah studied the sheriff's face, trying to discern his intentions. Are you going to arrest him? That depends. Daniels looked between them. On whether you're willing to trust me enough to hear me out. Samuel and Zarah exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, Samuel nodded. "We're listening." "Not here," Daniels decided. "My cabin's about a mile west. We can talk there and tend to that shoulder before you bleed out." When they hesitated, he added, "If I wanted to turn you in, Stone, I'd have called the others the moment I spotted you." With few options and Samuel's condition deteriorating, they followed the sheriff through the forest, away from the search party. Daniels's cabin proved to be a simple but sturdy structure, well hidden among the pines. Inside, he quickly gathered medical supplies while Zarah helped Samuel to a chair. "Why are you helping us?" Zarah asked as Daniels handed her clean bandages and a bottle of whiskey for the wound. The sheriff leaned against his table, arms crossed. "Because I've been following the Stone case for years, and it never sat right with me. Nathaniel Hargrove had a reputation for being a violent drunk who liked to draw on men to prove his courage. I knew 3 of the men he wounded before you killed him, Stone." Samuel, gritting his teeth as Zarah cleaned his wound, looked up sharply. "You believe it was self-defense?" "I do. But more importantly, so does Judge McAllister, who's arriving with Hargrove tomorrow." "The judge is on Hargrove's side," Zarah protested. "He's bringing him specifically to ensure a guilty verdict." Daniels shook his head. "That's what Hargrove thinks. What he doesn't know is that McAllister and I have been corresponding for months about this case. The judge has been gathering testimonies from witnesses who were intimidated into silence after the shooting. He believes there's enough evidence now to formally clear Stone's name." Hope flared in Zarah's heart, but Samuel remained skeptical. Why would McAllister risk Hargrove's wrath? "The man has influence throughout the territory. Because McAllister is retiring next month and moving east, he wants to set right some of the injustices he couldn't address while active on the bench." Daniels's expression was somber. "Your letter, Miss Blackburn, provided the final push he needed. Not because of your supposed eyewitness account, which he knew was fabricated, but because it showed someone was willing to stand up for the truth, even at personal risk." Zarah finished bandaging Samuel's shoulder, her mind racing. "So what happens now? Samuel is still wanted for other bounties, most of which stem from false accusations after the Hargrove killing," Daniels pointed out. "Clear his name on that charge, and the others become easier to address. McAllister has already sent inquiries to sheriffs in other jurisdictions where Stone is wanted. Several have responded that they'd be willing to drop charges if the Hargrove matter is resolved." Samuel's expression remained guarded, years of being hunted making trust difficult. "And you expect me to just walk into town and surrender, on your word that this judge will be fair?" "No," Daniels replied. "I expect you to stay hidden until after I've spoken with McAllister tomorrow. If he confirms what I've told you, then we arrange a controlled meeting somewhere secure, with only those we trust present." The plan was risky, fraught with potential betrayal at every turn. But as Zarah looked at Samuel pale from blood loss, exhausted from years of running, she knew they had to grasp this chance, however slim. "We'll do it," she decided, taking Samuel's hand. "If there's any possibility of clearing your name, of having a normal life together, we have to try." Samuel's fingers tightened around hers. "Together," he agreed softly. They spent the night in Daniels's cabin, the sheriff returning to town to avoid suspicion. Samuel's condition improved with rest and proper care, though the wound would take weeks to fully heal. As they lay side by side on the narrow cot, Zarah whispered plans for the future: a small ranch perhaps, somewhere with good water and fertile soil, where they could build a life away from the violence of Samuel's past. "You really think it's possible?" Samuel asked, his voice hushed in the darkness. "That after everything I might just walk free? I have to believe it," Zarah answered, nestling closer to his uninjured side. Faith is all we have right now. Morning brought Sheriff Daniels back to the cabin, his expression grave. Hargrove arrived early, he reported. He's got a dozen men with him, all armed to the teeth. He's offering $5,000 now for Stone, dead or alive. Zarah gasped at the sum. That's a fortune. Every fortune hunter in the territory will be looking for him. Exactly, Daniels agreed. Which is why we need to move faster than planned. Judge McAllister has agreed to meet privately tonight. I'll bring him here after dark. The day passed with excruciating slowness, tension building with each hour. Samuel checked and rechecked his gun, a habit born of years of vigilance. Zarah kept watch at the window, starting at every distant sound. By the time darkness fell, both were wound tight as springs. The sound of approaching horses sent Samuel to his feet, gun drawn despite his injured shoulder. Daniels had promised to give a specific whistle as warning, but no signal came. Instead, there was the unmistakable sound of men dismounting, surrounding the cabin. It's a trap, Samuel hissed, pulling Zarah away from the window. They followed Daniels, or he betrayed us. Before they could decide on a course of action, the cabin door swung open. Sheriff Daniels entered first, hands raised to show he meant no harm. Behind him came an elderly man in a judge's coat, and behind him, Victor Hargrove filled the doorway, his massive frame blocking the light from outside. Gray-haired and hard-faced, he carried himself with the confidence of a man accustomed to getting his way. His cold eyes fixed on Samuel, then shifted to Zarah. So, he said, his voice surprisingly soft, this is the woman who claims to have witnessed my son's death, and the man who caused it. The tension in the room was palpable. Samuel moved slightly, positioning himself between Hargrove and Zarah. His gun remained steady despite his injury. Mr. Hargrove insisted on coming, Judge McAllister explained, his lined face apologetic. I thought it best to accede rather than risk him discovering this meeting through other means. Put the gun down, Stone, Daniels urged. No one's here to harm you. Samuel's eyes never left Hargrove. Forgive me if I find that hard to believe, given the $5,000 bounty on my head. A tense silence followed, broken finally by Hargrove's bitter laugh. 5 years I've hunted you, Stone. 5 years of grief and rage and empty vengeance. He stepped further into the cabin. And now this slip of a girl writes me a letter full of obvious lies, claiming to have witnessed what happened. Yet instead of dismissing it, I find myself here, face to face with my son's killer and unable to pull the trigger. Do you know why? Enlighten me, Samuel replied, his voice tight. Because I've spent those 5 years collecting every scrap of information about Nathaniel's death. I've interviewed everyone who was in that saloon, and as much as I needed to believe you murdered him in cold blood, the evidence said otherwise. Hargrove's facade cracked, revealing the pain beneath. My son drew first. He was drunk and foolish and determined to make a name for himself by killing the famous Samuel Stone. And I've spent 5 years destroying my own soul by persecuting an innocent man. The admission hung in the air, stunning in its unexpectedness. Slowly, Samuel lowered his gun, though he kept it in hand. Why the bounty, then? Zarah asked. Why continue the hunt if you knew the truth? Hargrove's gaze shifted to her. Pride, stubbornness, the inability to admit I was wrong. Take your pick, Miss Blackburn. But your letter, your willingness to risk everything to defend this man forced me to confront my own cowardice. Judge McAllister stepped forward, a document in hand. I've prepared an official statement clearing Mr. Stone of all charges related to Nathaniel Hargrove's death. With Mr. Hargrove's testimony and my authority, we can begin the process of addressing the other bounties. Samuel stared at the paper as if it might vanish at any moment. Just like that. After 5 years of running, it ends with a signature. Not quite, Hargrove interjected. There's the matter of reparations for the harm I've caused. What followed was perhaps the strangest negotiation Zarah had ever witnessed. Hargrove, overflowing with a guilt he had suppressed for years, offered Samuel a substantial sum enough to buy land, build a home, start a new life free from the shadow of his past. Samuel initially refused, pride warring with practicality. It was Zarah who finally convinced him to accept, seeing in the offer not just financial security, but a form of justice, acknowledging the years stolen from him, the peace he deserved. By the time the papers were signed and the details arranged, dawn was breaking over the eastern mountains. Judge McAllister departed with promises to begin immediately on the legal work needed to clear Samuel's name in other jurisdictions. Hargrove left with a weight lifted from his shoulders, though the grief of his son's death would never fully leave him. Sheriff Daniels, who had remained mostly silent through the proceedings, finally spoke. It'll take time for word to spread that the bounty's been lifted. You should both stay clear of town for a while. I can bring supplies, keep you informed of progress. Samuel nodded, the exhaustion of the night of 5 years of vigilance evident in every line of his body. As the door closed behind the sheriff, he turned to Zarah, wonder in his eyes. Is it real? He asked softly. Are we truly free? Zarah took his face in her hands, her heart overflowing. We are, she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. We can begin again, Samuel, together. His arms encircled her, drawing her close. In that embrace was the promise of all they had dreamed of during those desperate days: a home, a future, a love unhindered by fear and flight. 2 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Samuel Stone and Zarah Blackburn were married in a simple ceremony in Aspen Creek's small church. The town had initially viewed their union with suspicion. The notorious gunslinger and the milliner's niece, an unexpected pairing. But as Samuel's name was cleared and the full story emerged, acceptance gradually followed. With Hargrove's reparation money, they purchased a modest ranch 10 miles outside of town, close enough for convenience, but far enough for privacy. The land was good, with a year-round stream and fertile soil for crops. The cabin, though basic, had strong bones and potential for expansion. On their first night in their new home, as they stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold, Samuel wrapped his arms around Zarah from behind. Thank you, he murmured against her hair. For what? She asked, leaning into his embrace. For seeing the man behind the reputation. For believing in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. For being stubborn enough to fight for us when I was ready to surrender. Zarah turned in his arms, looking up at the face that had become as familiar to her as her own. We saved each other, Samuel. Your courage gave me the strength to forge my own path instead of the one laid out for me. Your protection gave me the freedom to find my voice. He smiled, the expression transforming his once guarded features, from outlaw to rancher. Not the future I'd imagined for myself. Is it a disappointment? She teased. Samuel's answer was a kiss that spoke more eloquently than words, deep and tender and full of promise. It's more than I ever dared hope for, he said when they finally parted. A life with you, Zarah Stone. Peace after so much turmoil. A chance to build something that will last. In the years that followed, their ranch prospered, as did their family. Their first child, a son they named James, arrived a year after their marriage, followed 2 years later by a daughter, Elizabeth. Samuel proved to be a natural father, patient and protective, telling his children carefully edited stories of his adventures while teaching them to ride, to respect the land, to judge people by their actions rather than rumors. Zarah's Aunt Martha eventually sold her millinery shop and moved to the ranch, bringing her skills and comfortable presence to the growing household. Under her guidance, Zarah established a small school on their property, teaching not only their own children but those from neighboring ranches who had no access to formal education. Samuel's reputation gradually transformed from that of a notorious gunslinger to a respected rancher known for his fair dealings and quiet generosity. Though he never fully lost the vigilance that had kept him alive during his years as a fugitive, he learned to find joy in the ordinary rhythms of ranch life, the seasonal patterns of planting and harvest, the small triumphs of watching crops grow and children flourish. There were challenges, of course. Drought years that tested their resources, the occasional drifter who recognized Samuel and stirred up old stories, the usual hardships of frontier life. But through it all, the foundation they had built remained strong, a partnership forged in danger and strengthened by mutual respect and deepening love. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Samuel surprised Zarah with a locket containing miniature portraits of their children, the gold gleaming in the firelight. "It's beautiful," she whispered, touching it reverently. "Not as beautiful as the life you've given me," he replied, taking her hands in his. 10 years ago, I was a ghost of a man, haunted by my past with no future to speak of. Now look at us, land, home, family. All because you were stubborn enough to believe in redemption." Zarah smiled, thinking of that desperate day when bandits had chased her into a canyon and a notorious gunslinger had appeared like an avenging angel. "It wasn't stubbornness," she corrected. "It was love, even then, though I didn't recognize it. Love sees possibilities where others see only the past." Samuel drew her close, their years together evident in the way they fit perfectly against each other. "Then I am the most fortunate of men to be loved by you." Outside their window, the ranch stretched peaceful under the moonlight, the barn they had raised with neighbors' help, the corrals where their horses dozed, the fields that provided their livelihood. Beyond lay Aspen Creek, now a thriving town where they were welcomed rather than feared. It was a life neither could have imagined on that fateful day of their meeting, a redemption story written not in gunfire and vengeance, but in quiet courage and unwavering faith in each other. The notorious gunslinger and the woman brave enough to see his heart had found in each other not just safety, but home.